I'm sure I can't be the only person who feels this way. There's just too many games to play these days, and during certain windows, they all hit around the same time. And if you're anything like me, it's as exciting as it is panic-inducing. I like a good story in my games, and as luck would have it, strong narratives have become more and more important to the medium over the years. But the problem is that the internet moves so damn fast, and the rat race to make content available to people as quickly as possible and be first means that we're bombarded with headlines and YouTube videos with titles like Why X Character Betrayed Y Character, and thumbnails featuring major spoilers even days before a game comes out. When the reality that my time to indulge in this most sacred of pastimes is more limited now than ever meets my desire to have my journey remain as unspoiled as possible, I find myself blazing through new games quicker than I can digest them. And this creates a problem. Yeah, I got through new game number 147 without being spoiled, but at what cost? Well, the cost seems to be my enjoyment. I get to the credits, sure, but in doing so, I forget to observe and enjoy the part of games that make them unique from other forms of entertainment. You know, the part where you play them. I work so hard to reach the end that I never get to, or maybe never allow myself to, savor the experience. Maybe this is just my problem, but I suspect I'm not alone. I don't have a solution to this problem. Instead, I wanted to talk about a game that I haven't had this issue with. A title that transcended all the noise and transparently taught me to love playing games again. Obviously, this game is Valheim. Now, this video is a little different from my previous two, which focused on the narratives of prehistoric PS2 JRPGs. Valheim might look like a PS1 game, but it's pretty recent, and it doesn't really put an emphasis on story outside of its opening text crawl. It's a game purely about survival, crafting, and preparing to throw hands at several major bosses across its different biomes. As such, the game is focused on exploration and player agency. What you do and how you do it is entirely up to you. I'm not sure what drew me to this title. I've never played anything like it. Just look at my catalog. The majority of games I own heavily build their experience around the stories contained within. But there's no question that this is a game built simply for the joy of playing it. Whether it was the beautiful low-poly visuals or the promise of something fresh, I didn't need much convincing and bought the game within 10 minutes of reading about it. I opened it up, started a new game, and played for a few hours, fumbling with the controls and trying to get a feel for the resource gathering and management, a mechanic I was wholly unacquainted with. A few hours later, I closed the game, and not long after, I uninstalled it, lamenting that, if any more of my friends were interested in the game and started playing it, I'd probably have a much more enjoyable time. But then, one fateful December afternoon at the end of that same year, a buddy from back home sent me a message that he had finally gotten a gaming PC and that he was installing Valheim at that very moment. And so once more, I dove back in, this time with a fellow Viking at my side. I'll tell you now that Valheim is the most fun I have ever had in a video game. More than Conker's Bad Fur Day multiplayer. More than Spider-Man and Tony Hawk 2. They could stop releasing updates for this game today, and I still wouldn't regret a single penny or moment of it. Sure, I want more, but the adventures of Barefist and Torbjorn, those are our character names, are something that I'll cherish forever. They awoke in me something that I had long forgotten about. My love of playing video games simply to play them. It's not a very earth-shattering discovery, I know, but it's the one I needed. So for this video, rather than give you my take on the narrative of some game from the past, I thought it'd be fun to chronicle our journey through the 10th realm and peel back the layers of what made this experience just so damn memorable. Logging back into the game for the first time in months was a bit of an adjustment. Something that I neglected to mention before is that I managed to build myself a little house and beat the boss of the Meadows biome, Ekthir, before calling it quits during my first go-around. With Torbjorn joining my world, I had to scoop him up from the altar where new players spawn, but as Torb was more familiar with this style of game than myself, I didn't have to explain much. Instead, we focused on gathering materials and crafting him some weapons so that he could take on Ekvir and make sure that he had a proper feel for the game. In Valheim, the weapons, gear, and build materials you get at the start of the game are primitive at best. Your clothing is leather taken from the boars you hunt with wood clubs or flint knives. Everything has a purpose. You chop down trees to get wood, which you then use to build a little house, bed, and workbench, where you can upgrade your items. Having a house or base is crucial not just for having a place to store everything you collect, but also because the more you cozy up the spot with fire and decorations, the longer your rested buff lasts, which gives you quicker stamina regen. You can also cook food at your house, which is how you gain temporary boosts to your health or stamina. You can get meat from deer and boar, or gather things like raspberries from the land around you. Of course, better edible resources and recipes are found as you progress through the game. So at this point, we had taken down the first boss, which gives us the hard antler item needed to craft a pickaxe. Thanks to Hugin, the tutorial raven, we knew that we would then need to use the pickaxe to mine copper and tin from the next biome, the Black Forest. I don't think I can overstate just how intimidating a trip into the Black Forest can be for a Valheim newcomer. It's dark, as the name implies, the music is foreboding, and you start coming across new monsters like Grey Dwarves and skeletons. But the intimidation is constantly at odds with the dopamine hit you get when finding new materials like blueberries, carrots, and other types of wood, which are great for new recipes and craftable items. At this point, we had an issue though, because our little hut in the meadows wasn't going to cut it. So we closed up shop and started scouting for a nice patch of clear land not far from where we were and much closer to the Black Forest. After fencing off a small area to keep our things, we ventured off into the forest where we just started swinging our pickaxes at the first large deposit of copper we found, and were promptly killed by a troll. Yeah, these terrifying monstrosities roam the Black Forest, and in the early game, if you see one, you run. There's no war of attrition, no outsmarting it in combat. Not for us anyways. For Torb and I, it was clear there was a troll in the area whenever one of us started screaming in panic over Discord. Anyways, we slowly learned how to navigate the forest efficiently. Normally, one of us would pull a cart where we'd store metals and other gathered goods while the other moved ahead as a scout, utilizing a torch to light the way when necessary. All this exploring and collecting and losing our marbles when spotting a troll is fun, but these are all just the smaller experiences that happen along the way while working towards a larger goal. That goal being confronting the boss of the Black Forest biome, the Elder. Valheim's map is generated by seeds, and its lands are split into several biomes. Right now, we have the meadows, Black Forest, swamps, mountains, and plains, with more to come. Each biome is home to a different boss that needs to be slain, but where they appear is a mystery at first. To find the location of the nearest boss of any particular biome, you have to venture through said biome and find runestones which reveal the nearest boss altar. For the Black Forest, the runestones can be found within burial chambers. Like everything else in the forest, burial chambers are terrifying, but they can also be rewarding. Not only are they filled with skeletons and sometimes ghosts, but also resources that you can't get anywhere else at this stage of the game. Sterling cores, gold coins and amber, and a handful of other things. It's also around this time exploring these chambers when Torb and I began to define our combat roles within the game. There's a wide range of weapons within Valheim, and the more you use a particular weapon, the more your skill with it increases. As I was trying to get acquainted with the blocking and parrying mechanics, I found myself playing the role of the tank, and as Torb is more partial to long-range weapons, he went with the bow and arrow. This actually proved to be highly effective when navigating the narrow corridors of the burial chambers. With my shield at the ready, I'd march in front and open any doors we came across while Torb fired arrows at any enemies in our way, kept safe by my shield in the narrow corridors. Like I said, this proved highly effective, and we quickly found ourselves rich with Sterling cores, which it turns out were needed in order to smelt copper and tin ores into bars that we could then craft with. I think now's as good a time as any to bring up another part of the Valheim experience that ended up greatly appealing to me, namely, just how hands-on everything is. I think many games would fall back on having you use a menu interface to go through the smelter process, which is why I think I have a hard time getting into traditional city builders. It all ends up feeling kind of impersonal to me. But in Valheim, you actually have to walk your character up to the different sections of the stations in use in order to get through the process. So for example, if I want to craft a copper bar, first I need to build a kiln, which processes wood into coal. Then I place the copper ore into one side of the smelter and coal on the opposite side in order to power it. Give it a few moments and voila, copper bars. You can then use copper bars as is to acquire new items, or you can combine them with tin bars in order to get bronze, which unlocks a whole new tier of weapons, armors, tools, and items. Of course, making any of that means that you need to build a forge, a new kind of workbench suited to crafting with metals. There are also a fair amount of add-ons that you can make for your workbench, forge, and kitchen along the way that will allow you to craft higher tier items. It's a fun loop, and its hands-on nature, where menus are simple and used as sparingly as possible, makes the game feel all the more immersive. The rate of collecting copper, tin, and bronze early in your adventure is pretty slow going, so you have to be strategic in what you make. Do you forge a new mace, or do you get yourself a cultivator so you can start farming food and becoming more self-sufficient? By this time, we had extensively built out our base, and suffering through several enemy raids meant that we spent a session or two building a moat around the place to keep monsters from destroying our house and killing our boars. Oh yeah, that's another thing. You can totally tame and breed animals to create a steady income of leather scraps, meat, and other materials. So, now Torb and I felt like we had a solid grasp of the fundamental mechanics, but there was still one more task on our list that we had yet to tackle. The Elder. There was a problem with confronting the Elder, though. The closest altar was on another island, and we had yet to even touch the sailing aspect of the game. There are several types of vessels available for seafaring in Valheim, but at the start of the game, all you got is this sad little raft. And like everything else in this game, your first time setting sail is terrifying. We had no idea what lied in wait in the vast sea, but luckily the island was less than 5 minutes away, a straight shot from the shore we departed from. After disembarking, the boss altar was a short jog away, and, well, look, I'll be honest with you. Our battle with the Elder is hardly worth covering. We got stomped into oblivion, and I died something close to 5 times during the whole ordeal. The only reason we beat it the first time around was honestly due to cheesing it. Maybe it took pity on me, but after what must have been my 4th death, he just sorta stopped moving. So, Torb kept shooting it with fire arrows while I hurled insults at it from behind my shield, providing moral support while we waited for it to go down. I'm not proud, but that's how it happened. We spent so long in the Black Forest that, in all honesty, we were just kinda happy to be done with the thing. The Elder ended up dropping an item called the Swamp Key, cluing us in on our next biome. The Swamp Key was our, key to begin mining iron, the game's next big material for new equipment and build items. So, we knew what we needed to find, but we had no clue where to find it. Thus began a solid 2 weeks of pure tomfoolery on the ocean where we sailed around looking for a good-sized swamp, getting attacked by sea serpents, coming across leviathans, and, in what I suspect is something of a rite of passage in this game, getting insta-killed by death skeetos whenever we wandered too close to the plains biome, which is currently the endgame area. The first few swamp biomes that we came across were small, with no crypts to be found, but when we eventually found a decent-sized swamp, it dawned on us that we were in need of a new base, as we'd be unable to teleport iron to our current base with the portal. So we said our goodbyes to the Black Forest base and started laying down roots in what came to be called New Bornheim. The swamp is an uncomfortable experience in every sense of the word. The ground is uneven, the water's filled with leeches, the non-stop rain gives you a wet debuff, and it's chock full of creatures hell-bent on making your treks through as short as possible. As a result, it's 1000% the coolest place to build a base once you've cleared the game's current biomes. So, over the course of the next few weeks, we spent time exploring the crypts of a massive swamp we found, collecting iron and learning the usefulness of poison resist potions. We also found a new enemy to fear in the 1-star Draugr elites. But quite possibly the most memorable moment came when we met our first abomination. Abominations are tree-like monsters that like to erupt from the waters of the swamp with little to no warning. When we noticed our weapons dealing laughable damage to the creature, we quickly hightailed it out of there, only for it to follow us into the Black Forest. And that's when a troll came passing through. In what I can only describe as a Godzilla vs. King Kong situation, the troll decided to assert its dominance and throw down with the abomination, and so we spent the next few minutes cheering as we watched the two duke it out. The abomination won, but the troll put in enough damage that allowed us to finish it off, so pour one out for a real one. Around this time, we actually took a lot of focus off of just preparing for a fight with the bone mass. More frequently, we began logging in simply to relax and farm, or to alter the land around our base. In the grand scheme of things, these sessions would help us in our preparations for bone mass, but it became less about the boss and more about just enjoying all the different activities we could do in the game. Fast forward to our tussle with bone mass, we knew we had to go in more prepared than any other boss fight so far. We had spent weeks gathering iron to reinforce our weapons and armor, gathering materials to make poison resistance mead, and we even spent a few hours preparing the land around the altar to make it less treacherous to navigate during the fight. As a result, the fight with bone mass felt like the first proper boss in the game. Not because the other bosses were bad in any way, but because we finally understood the game we were playing and came in prepared. I know MMOs are well known for their fairly lengthy boss battles, but I've never really dabbled in those. Either way, our 40 to 60 minutes dealing with bone mass had us feeling like absolute champions when we came out of the other side. By this time, I was properly obsessed with this game. There's just no other word for it. It wasn't only how I had fun, but it was how I relaxed. If we didn't feel like adventuring, we'd just chill and find other things to do, like farm and accrue crops, try and hunt down and tame 2-star boars, or else try and touch up and build our bases with techniques we learned from the countless tutorials and explainer videos out there. It was, for what felt like the first time in years, a game I played simply for the fun of it. Crazy, I know, but I'd forgotten what that was like. There were no spoilers to worry about and avoid like the plague, no need to rush through it. It was just me, my bud, and every monster out there hell-bent on killing us, and I loved every minute of it. Building is no doubt my favorite thing to do in this game. The structures don't feel as prefabricated as the small handful of other games with building mechanics that I've dabbled in. You get enough different kinds of pieces of each material, and you can have your base be as utilitarian or as intricate as you like. And there's some strategy in the realm of base building too. First is figuring out how to execute on your vision while ensuring each piece is properly supported. Then there's a lot of planning and trial and error in optimizing the comfort level, and of course, making sure you have enough room for storage and your different workstations. There's a lot to consider when determining your home's layout. For instance, do you have just one storage area with a ton of chests so you can make one stop when returning from long treks? Or do you have multiple storage areas by each workstation to make crafting items quicker? It's a lot of fun, and at the height of my Valheim obsession, there were a couple times when I actually found myself dreaming of solutions to issues I stumbled across while building a new base. As I'm sure Torb can recall, there were probably too many times where he'd log in only to find some new alterations made to our base, major or otherwise. By the time we were getting ready to explore the mountains biome, Torb and I had found what I believe will likely be our main major base for the majority of the game going forward. I'll probably listen back on that sentence in a year and laugh given my obsession with building in this game, but it's hard to picture anything else we build outside of this base being anything more than outposts for future biomes and crafting and managing items that can't be teleported. As it stands, we've got a nice slice of land right on the coast and on the foot of an enormous mountains biome. Swamps and plains flank us on either side, so we've got easy access to all the materials we need. Anyways, we're currently winding our way to the end of this tale. With just 5 out of the 8 or 9 planned biomes currently released, the days where we had active goals to work towards were slowly approaching their end. Our next boss was Motor, the dragon mama found in the mountains. Luckily for us, a big content update for the mountains came out around the time that we were ready to begin exploring it, so we got to enjoy a whole new slew of enemies and the excellent frost caves just as our mountain journey got underway. In an additional stroke of luck, it turned out that the altar for Motor could be found in the mountains biome on our starter island, so sailing wasn't really a necessity this time. As much as we enjoyed it, we conquered the mountains in relatively short order. The big upgrade material found here is silver, which was quickly put to use in crafting a new cooking station, weapons, and armor. The standout item here is my absolute favorite weapon in the game, Frostner. It might as well be a toothpick in the mountains, given it deals frost damage, but it makes me feel like I'm swinging a freight train around. Anyways, the caves were cool and creepy, but the real highlight of our trip through the mountains was the way in which we summoned the boss. I've mentioned boss altars before, but I haven't really explained them in full. Basically, you need to sacrifice specific items at each altar to summon the bosses. For Motor, you need a set of dragon eggs. As these can't be teleported through portals, Torb and I figured that we'd roam the mountains, collect the eggs, and drop them off at the altar so we could return to our base and prepare. Well, in a complete lapse of judgment, after we put the eggs on the altar, Torb walked up to a little runestone and, wondering what the thing did, decided to just press the button. So of course we wound up fighting Motor that night. And let me tell you, it was a slog. It took us a bit to work through the laughter of the absurdity of the whole situation, but once we did, we began trying to find out the pattern to the Dragon Mama's attacks and how we could work around them. As a melee-focused player, I was worried about my prospects for dealing any meaningful damage to an enemy that could fly. And unfortunately, the constant onslaught of other enemies from the mountain meant that Torbjorn's bow was useless, as he'd spend most of his time running between our base and 12 different graves he wound up making throughout the battle. Armed with nothing but a shield and a mace, I'd spent the following 30 minutes sprinting from place to place, trying to deal damage to the dragon whenever it landed, only to find my stamina too drained to attack before she'd take off again. Absolutely maddening. Eventually, we started using our brains, and I worked to control the ground creatures while Torb fired arrows at our main target. Another 45 minutes went by, and finally the fourth boss went down. All that remained was the Goblin King. The Plains biome, which I mentioned earlier, is the last biome of the current build of Valheim. Being the territory of Yaglith, the last boss, it's naturally home to the game's most hardened of hit squad killers. With locks, deathsquitos, and several breeds of feelings over every hill, there's a lot to be wary of, and our first few trips into the plains wound up feeling reminiscent of our early days tiptoeing through the Black Forest. But by this time, you've got the mechanics of the game down, so it's not long before you're able to effectively manage mobs of these new enemies. The keyword there is manage. Not every fight is winnable during your early days roaming the plains, and these monsters can hit you for some serious damage. What's more, the plains start to introduce magic-wielding enemies with the shamans, who can both hurl magic at you and shield other members of their group. But if you play it safe and smart, you won't be caught off guard too often. The appearance of these shaman is actually really intriguing. It's possible that there are more enemies wielding magic on the horizon, and it's just as likely that some might be added to the game's earlier biomes as well. Given Valheim's early access status, it makes sense to introduce them here in the meantime if the minds behind the game are still developing how magic is balanced and fits into the world. Either way, I'm really hoping we get some way of wielding magic on our own. At any rate, let's wrap this journey up. The boss of the plains is Yaglith, and oh boy, we thought we had this guy's number. During our conquest through the mountains, we had started taming and breeding wolves, and so we thought we'd roll in with a pack of 10 wolves and we'd really show them what for. But 2 died on the way to his altar, and the rest blew up on impact when he whipped out his first shockwave attack. So, the fight went pretty fucking poorly. Actually, we couldn't even beat him on the same day. After something like 40 minutes of fighting him, we called it quits and decided to spend the following week and a half preparing. What we didn't know going in is that Yaglith is all about fire, so we spent a lot of that time making a bunch of fire-resistant wine. Yaglith's fire affinity also meant that it was time for Torb to retire his root armor. Fire and wood don't mix, so, walking into battle donning that wasn't going to do us any favors. Our second go-around went much better. In a reversal of the situation we found ourselves in while facing Motor, this time I got to get up in Yaglith's face with my trusty Frostner, while Torbjorn slung arrows at him and managed any mobs that wandered in. Even with all our preparation, Yaglith was a tough fight to work through. He has 3 main attacks to look out for: his Fire Breath, a Meteor Shower, and an AoE attack that does fire and lightning damage. The Fire Breath is the easiest to avoid, just strafe to the side or take cover behind one of the giant stone fingers by his altar. Avoiding his AoE is simple enough, just don't get too close. The real tough one to avoid is the meteor shower. These come down quick and can inflict a burn status. I wouldn't call Yagluth a damage sponge though. In all honesty, once you start putting up numbers, his health can get whittled down at a good pace. The problem is getting close. His AoE attack leaves a lingering damage effect around him, and if you get hit with a meteor shower at the same time, it can be as good as a death sentence, so this fight is a real test of patience. My recommendation is using Ecthir's buff to lessen the strain on your stamina bar when sprinting, and only running in during his fire beam, which is the easiest attack to avoid. If you can get it behind him after his AoE attack, that works too. I've noticed that the field of effect doesn't always catch back there. It was hard fought, but man did coming out of the other side of that fight feel rewarding, even if all we got was a trophy and a placeholder item called Yagluth thing. Cool. With the fall of the Goblin King, we had reached the finish line. Our battles had finally come to an end. Well, at least for now. All of Valheim's systems create a structure for a game that's much more immersive than almost any other I've played. The hunting, gathering, crafting, and building all weave together in a manner that really makes me feel like the bearded Giga-Chad that I've been roaming around the wilderness as for hundreds of hours. No one aspect of the experience feels overshadowed by its sister components. Hours in, the building is just as important and rewarding as gathering and farming food. Each time you log in, you might be tackling a different objective, but no matter how seemingly small, you never come out feeling like you wasted time, because it all funnels directly into your survival. It wasn't until I started playing Valheim with Torb that I realized that this hobby of mine, gaming, had started stressing me out due to the need I felt to play through games as quickly as possible. And obviously that's my problem, but I'm grateful it gave me this perspective because it's allowed me to look back at the how and why of each title I choose to play. I was just so focused on getting through games unspoiled that I was forgetting to have fun. I mean, in an ideal world, I could take my sweet-ass time meandering through a game like Xenoblade 3 for months, enjoying the complete experience of exploring its world and systems while never having a plot beat ruined for me. But I just don't think we live in that world anymore. Speaking of Xenoblade 3, thanks to my Valheim experience, when I booted up the game, I was hyper aware of my options before diving in for the first time. Sprint through to the credits unscathed, or enjoy my adventure and take my time with the potential of being spoiled. I chose the latter, and while I did wind up having some major story revelations revealed early to me via random thumbnails hardly 3 days later, I do think that I had a much better experience with the game than I otherwise might have. Because, in all honesty, I'm so tired of doing the sprint. Maybe I take the ridiculous storylines in my anime games too seriously, but for what it's worth, I don't know if the experience of getting to the credits unspoiled should outweigh the enjoyment of the game itself. That's probably on a case-by-case basis and for each individual to choose. Anyways, I'm gonna end this here. I guess if there's any lesson in this, it's try and play games that fall out of your usual wheelhouse. Even if you don't find a gem, you might, at the very least, come away feeling reinvigorated or with some insight into your playing habits. Thanks for watching. This was a fun one to write. I tend to focus more on narratives, obviously, so attempting to break down what made this game click with me on a mechanical level was a good challenge to give myself. Hopefully I did it justice. I also want to give a massive shout out to my buddy Torb. We never recorded any of our original play sessions, as I didn't think I'd ever make a video about our experience, but he agreed to retrace our steps through Valheim so we could capture footage for this project. I've really been enjoying making these videos, and the responses so far have been beyond humbling. I've got a solid slate of content planned, some of which require a boatload of research, but I'm working to release some shorter pieces in the interim. At any rate, let me know in the comments what games you'd like to see me cover. I'm curious to see everyone's interests. See you later.